Good evening, everybody. I welcome you all to 𝑭𝒐𝒖𝒏𝒅, the premier institution of India, providing coaching for civil service examination. In today's class, I will be discussing about suicide. It's a topic of your sociology paper 1. In addition to that, even in GS paper 1, questions are asked frequently related to suicide. For example, I will be telling you that in the last year, GS paper 1, that is Indian society, in 2023, a question has been asked, that is question number 9. Why the rate of suicide among young girls, young women in India is growing? A question that has been asked last time. In addition to that, even in 𝑭𝒐𝒐 also, a question is asked very frequently to all candidates that why the rate of suicide among the farmers in India has been increased over the last 20 years. Keeping in mind the requirement of civil service, general study paper 1, as well as sociology optional paper 1, I will be discussing in detail why the rate of suicide among people in India is growing. Why do people commit suicide? That I will be discussing. But before discussing this, I am just trying to explain you in terms of sociological theory. Then I would go to GS paper 1 and I would discuss in detail. You see, there is a professor of sociology. His name is Professor Emile Durkheim. Professor of Sociology, his name is Professor Emile Durkheim, who has discussed about theory of suicide. His name is Durkheim. Durkheim has discussed about suicide. Durkheim wrote a book. The title of the book is 𝐸𝐴, which was published in the year 1897 AD. In this book, he made a detailed discussion about suicide. First, I want to explain you the meaning of suicide. Suicide, that is combination of two concepts. First is 𝑭𝒐𝒐. 𝑭𝒐𝒐 means self, side means killing. So what do we mean by suicide? Suicide is the act of killing oneself. A person killing himself or herself is called suicide. So the act of killing oneself is called suicide. And you know, in our country, farmers are committing suicide. Young girls are committing suicide. After failure in examination, even some civil service aspirants also commit suicide. In addition to that, even rich people, after losing their prosperity suddenly and significantly, they are also committing suicide. So the act of killing oneself is called suicide. And I am discussing the sociological framework related to suicide. You see, though Durkheim developed his theory of suicide in 1897, but suicide is an age-old problem in our country and all over the world. Suicide is as old as human society is, because while people emerged on the surface of the earth and they felt frustrated, they experienced frustration, depression, alienation, they also committed suicide. So that's the reason I want to tell you the fact that suicide is as old as human society is. So Durkheim developed a comprehensive theory related to suicide, which was published in his book in 1897 AD. Title of the book is 𝐸𝒐𝒐, I have already discussed. But before Durkheim, other people, other theorists, they have also discussed about suicide. So who are the other theorists? First is the psychologist. Psychologist. What the psychologists say about suicide? Psychologists are of the opinion that When a person experiences utter frustration, deep depression, or mental alienation, he or she commits suicide. Therefore, psychologists are of the opinion that frustration, utter frustration, and deep depression is the main cause of suicide. This is the view of the psychologist. Durkheim studied their view. Then there are biologists. How did the biologist explain suicide? Biologist explained suicide in terms of heredity, in terms of genes, genetic factor. Biologists are of the opinion that if a person's father had committed suicide, if a person's grandfather or grandmother had committed suicide, then the person is having higher possibility of committing suicide. Therefore, biologists tried to explain suicide in terms of heredity, in terms of genetic factor. All of you are clear? Then came forward 𝐻𝐽𝐬, geographer and climatologist. Geographer and climatologists, they tried to explain suicide in terms of geographical location of the country or climatic condition of a country. For example, I am telling you, geographer and climatologists, they are of the opinion that people of warm climate, hot climate like Asia and Africa, they commit suicide at a lower rate compared to people of cold climate like Europe and America. That means they are of the opinion that cold climate is contributing towards suicide, and if the climate is hot, if the climate is warm, the possibility of suicide on part of the people is less. You are getting my point? So in this way, geographer and climatologist, they tried to explain suicide in terms of geographical location of the country, in terms of climatic condition persisting in the country, and they made a comparison in terms of saying the fact that people of cold climatic countries are having higher possibility of committing suicide compared to the people of hot climatic countries. Means people of hot climatic country, they commit suicide at a lower rate, but people of cold climatic country commit suicide at a higher rate. In this way, this is the biologist, psychologist, and geographer and climatologist, those who discussed about suicide by discussing different factors. What did Durkheim do? Durkheim is of the opinion that suicide is a social fact. People of society commit suicide. Something is going wrong in social life. Something is going wrong in social situation for which people commit suicide. Therefore, Durkheim is of the opinion that suicide can be explained in terms of social situation. Suicide can be explained in terms of social condition that people are experiencing. In this way, Durkheim is trying to explain suicide in terms of social situation. What are the situations that has been taken into consideration by Professor Durkheim? Durkheim considered two factors just to explain suicide. I have already mentioned, you see, Durkheim is of the opinion that at the base of suicide is lying the social condition, at the base of suicide is lying the social situation that the people are confronting with. Okay, so how Durkheim is explaining all these things that I would be discussing, just you come to that. Durkheim considered two social factors, namely social integration and social regulation, on the basis of which Durkheim discussed about 4 types of suicide. So, right now Durkheim considered 2 factors, namely social integration is the first factor, second factor is social regulation. Listen, what do you mean by social integration? Social integration is a mechanism, or social integration is a device which binds an individual with a group. Group may be family, group may be a religious group, group may be a country, or group may be the whole world. Group starts at least from 2 persons and there is no upper limit of the group, the whole world is also a group. So a mechanism by which an individual is attached with his family, that is called social integration. A mechanism by which an individual is attached with his religion, that is also social integration. A mechanism by which a person is binded with his country, that is also social integration. Or a mechanism by which a person is attached with the whole world, that is also called social integration. So Durkheim is trying to explain suicide in terms of first factor, that is called social integration, and I want to give you the meaning of social integration by telling the fact that social integration is a mechanism by which a person is binded or attached with the group. Group may be the family, group may be the country, group may be the religious group, and group may be the international community, that is the whole world. This is social integration. So Durkheim considered first factor, that is social integration, and the second factor for suicide that has been considered by Durkheim, that is called social regulation. What do you mean by social regulation? Social regulation, as per Durkheim, is a mechanism by which discipline is brought in life of the people in a society. So I am repeating it again. Social regulation is a mechanism by which discipline is brought in life of the people. In addition to that, I can tell you, social regulation is a mechanism by which people also obey the law of their land, law of their country, law of their locality. That is also social regulation. So in this way, Professor Durkheim considered two social factors, namely social integration is the first factor, second factor is social regulation. On the basis of these two social factors, Durkheim made a four-fold classification of suicide. You see, I am right now taking you back to the analysis of the psychologist, biologist, climatologist and geographer. Psychologist, biologist, climatologist and geographer, they tried to explain suicide. Psychologist explained it in terms of depression. Biologist explained it in terms of heredity. Climatologist and geographer explained it in terms of geographical location and climatic condition that people are living in. But Durkheim says no. This climatic condition, geographical location, psychological depression or heredity, they may be the instant cause of suicide. But the root of suicide is not all these things. Root of suicide lies in social situation. So while psychologist, biologist, geographer and climatologist are trying to explain suicide in terms of instant cause, in terms of immediate cause, on the other hand, Durkheim is trying to explain suicide by considering the root cause of suicide, that is social situation that the person is experiencing. Because of social situation, people feel tempted to commit suicide. All of you are clear? So in this way, Durkheim did not accept the explanation given by psychologist, biologist, geographer and climatologist. Rather, Durkheim considered the root cause for which people in a society are experiencing or are committing suicide. All of you are clear? So right now, come to the analysis of Professor Emile Durkheim. As I told you the fact that Professor Emile Durkheim wrote a book with the title Lee's Suicide, which was published in the year 1897. In that book, Professor Durkheim has taken into consideration two factors, namely social integration and social regulation. I have already discussed. On the basis of these two social factors, Professor Durkheim made a four-fold classification of suicide. What are the four types of suicide discussed by Durkheim that I am explaining you? So, you see, right now, you see, come to this. This is the x-axis. This is the x-axis. This is x-axis. Okay. And this is y-axis. On x-axis, Durkheim took social integration, I have mentioned. This is social integration. Durkheim has taken social integration in x-axis. Then Durkheim has taken social regulation on y-axis. You all are clear regarding the meaning of social integration and regulation. I have already discussed. Still then I am repeating. Social integration is a mechanism by which an individual is attached with the group. That group may be family, that group may be the religious group, that group may be the economic group, that group may be a country, that group may be the whole world. This is social integration. And what is social regulation? I am briefing it again. Social regulation is a mechanism by which discipline is brought in the life of the people, or social regulation is a mechanism by which people obey the law of their country, the law of their land. Right now, Professor Durkheim took social integration on x-axis. On the basis of social integration, Durkheim made a twofold classification of suicide. What are they? First is egoistic suicide. First is egoistic suicide. Second is altruistic suicide. So on the basis of social integration, Durkheim discussed about two types of suicides, namely egoistic suicide and altruistic suicide. What is egoistic suicide? Egoistic has been derived from the root word that is ego. Ego. Ego means self. Ego means self. So who is an egoistic person? A self-centric person is called egoistic person. Egoistic person is a person who always thinks about himself or herself, but egoistic person does not think about other people of the society. That is egoistic person. So what is egoistic suicide? Just you see, this is integration, this is 0, 0 coordinate. You know, this is the left hand side. Left hand side means integration is minus. Minus integration means disintegration. Minus integration means disintegration. Yes or no? Minus integration means disintegration. This is the positive side of integration, means this is integration. So this is, you see, from this onward, this is integration. From this onward, this is disintegration. So egoistic person means who is an egoistic person? I told you, a self-centric person is called egoistic person. So egoistic person is not attached with other people of the society. He or she always thinks about himself or herself. He or she does not think about the other people, other members of society. So in this way, egoistic person is not attached with a group. Egoistic person is not attached with his family. Egoistic person is not attached with his religion. Egoistic person is not attached with his country. Egoistic person is not attached with the whole world. That is egoistic person. So in this way, an egoistic person is experiencing disintegration, or an egoistic person lacks integration with the group or with the society. So I want to tell you the fact, while a person's attachment or integration with the group decreases and reaches at the bottom, the person experiences disintegration, and a person who is experiencing disintegration or detachment with his group, that person is having higher possibility of committing suicide. That is called egoistic suicide. All of you got my point? So in this way, in a very simpler way, I want to tell you the fact that egoistic suicide is a type of suicide committed by the people who are experiencing detachment or disintegration with the group. Group may be family, group may be the religious group may be the country, or group may be the whole world. So all of you are clear what an egoistic suicide is all about. In simpler way, in single sentence, I want to tell you the fact that egoistic suicide is a suicide committed by a person who is experiencing disintegration or a detachment with the group. All of you are clear? Got my point properly? Okay. So, in context of discussion related to suicide, Professor Durkheim has adopted comparative method. Professor Durkheim has adopted comparative method. What is comparative method? Right now I am telling you. What is comparative method? Durkheim has adopted comparative method in context of analysis related to suicide, particularly egoistic suicide. What is comparative method? Comparative method. Durkheim has adopted comparative method in context of discussion related to egoistic suicide. Comparative, root word is comparison. Yes or no? Comparison, comparative. So what is comparative method? Comparative method is a method by which a comparison is made between two groups with respect to a single event or single phenomenon. For example, I can tell you, every year some candidates are becoming successful in IS examination or UPSC civil service examination. If I say that the rate of success among male candidates is higher than the female candidates in civil service examination, this is a comparative method. All of you are clear. Why? Because here I compared the rate of success of male candidates with female candidates. So in this way, I am telling you the fact that comparative method is a method by which a comparison is made between two groups with respect to a single event or single phenomenon. Clear? So Durkheim has applied or adopted comparative method in context of his discussion related to egoistic suicide. So what he has said by adopting comparative method? I have written all these things. You see, Durkheim says, first point, rate of suicide among the Protestants, make a correction, plural, Protestants. Rate of suicide among the Protestants is higher than Catholic. What is Protestant? What is Catholic? You see, Christian people all over the world, Christian people all over the world are divided. Christian people all over the world are divided into two groups. First is Catholic, second is Protestant. Who are Catholic? Who are Protestants? Catholic people, Catholic Christians are very traditional Christians. They love to go to the church. They love to listen to the sermon delivered by the Pope. They adopt all sorts of ritualistic activities related to religion. They are in the church. They are called the Catholic people. So they are comparatively traditional people. So these traditional Christians, those who frequently go to church, listen to the sermon delivered by the Pope or Church Father, and those who follow all the principles prescribed in the scripture in literal sense, in Christian scripture, that is the Holy Bible, this group of people are called Catholic Christians. They frequently go to the church. Opposite of Catholic group is the Protestant group. Protestant people, they believe in God, but they don't like to go to the church. They don't like to listen to the sermon delivered by the church father or pope. Rather, they think very scientifically about religion, that work is worship and duty is God. Therefore, they think it is wastage of time just to attend the sermon delivered by the Pope. Not necessary. Go to your duty. Go to your work. Work there very sincerely, because work is worship and duty is God. In this way, on the basis of both Catholic Christians and Protestant Christians, they believe in God. They believe in religion. But their approach of believing in God is different. So in this way, they are the two groups, Protestants and Catholic. So right now, what did Durkheim do? You know, people of every religion commit suicide. They may be Hindu, they may be Muslim, they may be Christian, they may be Buddhist, Jain, that doesn't matter. So what did Durkheim do? Durkheim collected data from different parts of Europe. And collecting data from different parts of Europe, making a comparison between Catholic Christians and Protestant Christians, Durkheim reached at the conclusion that the rate of suicide among Protestant is higher than the rate of suicide among Catholic. Means rate of suicide among Catholic is less, rate of suicide among Protestant is more. Is not it a comparative method? Just the example that I cited. Rate of success among the female aspirant in civil service examination is less, rate of success in male civil service aspirant is higher. This is a comparison. Exactly in that way, Durkheim also compared the rate of suicide among the Catholic Christians and Protestant Christians, collecting data from different parts of Europe, from different countries of Europe. Durkheim reached at the conclusion that rate of suicide among Protestant Christian is higher and rate of suicide among Catholic Christian is lower. How Durkheim is explaining it? Durkheim is of the opinion that when a Catholic person fails in any matter, it may be education, it may be competitive examination, it may be business, it may even be marriage related matter. After failure, a person will feel frustration, and if this frustration persists for a long period of time, it would lead towards depression, and deep depression is the instant cause of suicide, what psychologists were telling. But Durkheim considers not the instant cause of suicide, not the immediate cause of suicide, but the root cause of suicide. For example, I am telling you, there are two persons, there are two candidates. One is from Catholic community, another is from Protestant communities. A person belonging to Catholic group, Catholic Christian group, he took an examination, he failed there, she failed there. Then what happened? After failure, he would go to church. He would sit in front of God in the church with tearful eyes, sometimes tears crossing across the cheek. And he prays to the God, God, why did you bring failure in my life? So in this way, while a Catholic candidate, after failure in examination, after failure in any sphere of life, it may be business, it may be marriage, any sphere of life, as he or she goes to the church regularly, because of it, he or she has been attached, he or she has been integrated with the church. Church is a religious group. And sometimes going to nobody in the surface of the earth knows, on the surface of the earth knows with certainty whether God is there or God is not there. But while you go to religious place like temple, church, mosque, gurudwara, synagogue, obviously in church, in place of worship, church, mosque, gurudwara, you get a special feeling. That feeling you will never get in workplace. So what Durkheim wants to tell you is that a Catholic Christian is integrated, is attached with the church. While he goes to the church, he listens to the sermon delivered by the Pope. He is listening with tearful eyes, sometimes tears crossing across the cheek. In this way, he is getting integrated with the religious community. And because of frequently attending the church, he forgets about his failure in examination, failure in marital life, failure in business, or failure in any other sphere of life. But on the other hand, a Protestant person, he also believes in God, she also believes in God, but after failure in any sphere of life, he or she does not go to church, he or she does not listen to the sermon delivered by the Pope. Rather, he goes to the workplace. You know, after failure, if you go to the workplace, you don't feel concentrated in your work. And obviously, your presence in a religious place like church, mosque, gurudwara, that gives you a special feeling. That type of feeling you will never ever get in your workplace. So Catholic Christian is attached with a church, is integrated with church. Because of his attachment or integration with church, he is developing the ability to forget about his failure. On the other hand, Protestant person believes in God, but he or she does not go to the church, does not listen to the sermon delivered by the Pope. That's the reason while he is present in workplace, he is thinking again and again about his failure, and thinking again and again about the failure would bring a feeling that is called depression, that is called frustration after some time, and with the passage of time, this frustration would be converted into depression, and if this depression continues for a long period of time, this would become deep depression, and this deep depression is the main cause of suicide, what the psychologists were telling. So psychologists were explaining suicide in terms of instant cause of suicide, that is deep depression. On the other hand, Durkheim explains it in terms of root cause, that is social situation. What is social situation? That a Catholic person is less attached with his social, a Catholic person is more attached with his group, religious group, that is a social situation. A Protestant person is less attached with his religious group, so more attachment with the religious group is bringing integration, and because of proper integration of Catholic Christian, rate of suicide among Catholic Christian is less, and lack of integration with the religious group, that is church, is inducing the suicidal potential among the Protestant Christian, for which collecting data from different parts of Europe, Durkheim reached at the conclusion that the rate of suicide among Protestant is higher than Catholic. This point is clear to all of you? All of you got it? Okay. Then come to next comparative statement, statement number 2. This is one explained. Statement number 2, rate of suicide among Anglican Protestant. Rate of suicide among Anglican Protestant and non-Anglican Protestant. This comparison has been made. What is Anglican Protestant? Anglican means something related with English. English means Britain. Non-Anglican means obviously those who are not having British origin, they are called non-Anglican. Anglican means people having British origin. In Britain also, but first I told you, Christianity is broadly divided into two, Protestant and Catholic. Again, Durkheim divided Protestant people into two groups, that is Anglican Protestant versus non-Anglican Protestant. Means Protestant having British origin and Protestant not having British origin. And Durkheim collected data from different parts of the Europe, made a comparison, and reached at the conclusion that the rate of suicide among non-Anglican Protestants, rate of suicide, ROS, it means rate of suicide. Rate of suicide among non-Anglican Protestant is higher than Anglican Protestant. Why? You know, British people are by nature conservative. Yes or no? There is a popular saying that British people by nature are conservative. Why? You know, today democracy persists in most part of the world. Britain is also having democracy. Yes or no? Britain is having parliamentary democracy, and we people from in India, we borrowed parliamentary democracy from Britain. In India, President of India is the symbolic head of India. Yes or no? President of India is the symbolic head of India. But in Britain, who is the symbolic head of Britain? It's not the president, it's not the prime minister, it is the queen or it is the king. Yes or no? So you see, Britain is a democracy, but the queen's and the king's position is not a democratic position, it is a hereditary position. If somebody has been born in king's family, he or she would become a king or queen. Yes or no? So this is the conservative nature. So generally Britishers are conservative. So Protestants are divided into two groups. British Protestant, they are called Anglican Protestant. Non-British Protestant, that is non-Anglican Protestant. So Durkheim collected data from different parts of Europe and reached at the conclusion that the rate of suicide among non-Anglican Protestant is higher and the rate of suicide among the Anglican Protestant is lower. What explanation Durkheim is giving? Durkheim is of the opinion that English Protestant by nature are liberal, but British Protestant by nature are conservative. Okay, as they are conservative, they also go to the church. They also listen to the sermon delivered by the Pope compared to non-Anglican Protestant. Getting my point? So, and people, those who go to the church, they get integrated with the church. While they are getting integrated with the church, their possibility of committing suicide is reduced. So in this way, by collecting data from different parts of Europe, Professor Durkheim made a comparative statement, that is the statement number 2, rate of suicide among non-Anglican Protestant is higher than Anglican Protestant. Why? I have already explained you. Because English people by nature are conservative. I am telling you an interesting story, a jokes related to these English people. One day I was reading a story written by a modern writer. In this story, the writer had given a view that as long as civilization persists on the surface of the earth, there would be 5 queens. You might be feeling very strange. Why 5 queens? This is the theme of the short story written by a modern writer. The writer writes, as long as civilization persists on the surface of the earth, there would be 5 queens. Who are the 5 queens? He says, sorry. He said, sorry. Just repeating, he says, as long as civilization persists on the surface of the earth, there would be 5 queens. Who are they? 4 queens are the queens of playing card. Taspata. Taspata में तो 4 queen है. You know Taspata? There are 4 queens or not? Means playing card is very popular game. In playing cards or Taspata, you would find there are 4 queens. 4 queens Taspata game में है. Or 5th queen is the Queen of England. Yes or no? As long as democracy persists in England, there would be a queen who would be heading, symbolically heading the British parliamentary system, British parliamentary democracy. Yes or no? Do you think that democracy would be vanished from Britain? No. So that's the reason the writer says, as long as civilization persists on the surface of the earth, जितना दिन सभ्यता पृथ्वी पृष्ठ में एग्जिस्ट करते हैं, इतना दिन 5 क्वीन रहेंगे. 4 क्वीन ताशपत्ता में and the 5th queen is the Queen of England. This statement of this writer depicts also the conservative nature of the British people. Therefore, though Protestant in general are liberal, but British Protestants are conservative. As they are conservative, they attend the church, they get integrated with the religious group. Because of their attachment with religious group, rate of suicide among British Protestant is less. Rate of suicide among non-British Protestant is more. Means Anglican Protestant का suicide rate कम है, non-Anglican, non-British Protestant का suicide rate ज़्यादा है. Got it? So second statement is clear. Then the third comparative statement has been given by Durkheim with respect to egoistic suicide. Durkheim is of the opinion that Durkheim collected data from different parts of Europe. Durkheim divided the people into two groups, married people versus unmarried people. Comparative method, comparison is made. क्या married लोग ज़्यादा suicide करते हैं ना unmarried लोग ज़्यादा suicide करते हैं. Durkheim, by collecting data from different parts of Europe, reached at the conclusion that the rate of suicide among married people is less and the rate of suicide among unmarried people is more. Unmarried people means unmarried man, that is called bachelor, unmarried woman or lady, that is called spinster. Spinster means unmarried lady. Bachelor means unmarried male. Unmarried male bachelor, unmarried female, that is called spinster. क्या कि शादी करेंगे तो सुइसाइड का पॉसिबिलिटी कम हो जाएगा, शादी नहीं करेंगे तो सुइसाइड का रेट ज़्यादा हो जाएगा. इसीलिए शादी कर लो, सुइसाइड नहीं करेंगे तुम. ओके, मैं तो कुछ नहीं बोलता हूँ, जो दरखेम बोलता हूँ. जस्ट आई एम पुटिंग the words of Durkheim into my mouth. Okay. So, Durkheim collected data. Durkheim has not said anything out of imagination. Durkheim conducted extensive research about suicide. कितना परसेंट मेल, कितना परसेंट बैचलर सुइसाइड करते हैं, कितना परसेंट स्पिनस्टर सुइसाइड करते हैं और कितना परसेंट मैरिड लोग सुइसाइड करते हैं. बाय कलेक्टिंग डाटा फ्रॉम डिफरेंट पार्ट्स ऑफ यूरोप, Durkheim, by adopting comparative method, reached at the conclusion that the rate of suicide among bachelor and spinster is higher than the rate of suicide among married people. How? You know the fact that married people, they fight very frequently with each other. It's very natural. क्या ये तो this is the speciality of marriage. The reality of marriage is that you cannot live with your marital partner and you cannot also live without your marital partner. आप मैरिटल पार्टनर का साथ नहीं रह सकते हैं, आप मैरिटल पार्टनर का बिना भी नहीं रह सकते हैं. यू कैनॉट लिव विथ योर मैरिटल पार्टनर, यू कैनॉट लिव विदाउट योर मैरिटल पार्टनर. दिस इज द स्पेशलिटी ऑफ मैरिज. सो मैरिड पीपल, दे फाइट विथ ईच अदर. देयर इज ए पॉपुलर सेइंग दैट द मोर क्लोज द रिलेशनशिप इज, द मोर इंटेंस द कॉन्फ्लिक्ट इज. आपका रिलेशनशिप में जितना इंटेंसिटी हायर है, आपका रिलेशनशिप में इतना फाइटिंग का इंटेंसिटी भी हायर होगा. द मोर क्लोज द रिलेशनशिप इज, द मोर इंटेंस द कॉन्फ्लिक्ट इज. मीन्स क्लोज पीपल फाइट विथ ईच अदर. यू फाइट विथ योर पेरेंट्स बिकॉज पेरेंट्स आर वेरी क्लोज टू यू. You fight with your sibling. Sibling means brother, real brother, sister. You fight with them. Do you fight with the stranger? Do you fight with the stranger who is moving in the street? No, not at all, because you don't have any relationship with stranger. You have very good relationship, very intensified relationship with your father, with your mother, with your brother, with your sister. That's the reason you fight with the people, those who are very close to you. Got it? So, married people, husband and wife, they fight with each other. But while the feeling of suicide comes to the mind of the married people, they think, मैं तो सुइसाइड कर देंगे, सुइसाइड के बाद मेरा पार्टनर का कंडीशन क्या होगा, यही से सोच सोच कर वो सुइसाइड नहीं करते हैं। लेकिन जो अनमैरिड है, मेल है तो उनको बैचलर बोलेंगे, फीमेल है तो उनको हम स्पिंस्टर बोलेंगे। क्या बैचलर एंड स्पिंस्टर, दे डोंट हैव एनी पार्टनर, while suicide feeling comes to their mind, they don't think about their partner because they have no partner at all. Are you getting my point? So इसीलिए क्या दरखेम बोलते हैं, दरखेम बोलते हैं बैचलर और स्पिंस्टर आर एक्सपीरियंसिंग डिसइंटीग्रेशन because they have no partner, they don't have any attachment with the partner. लेकिन मैरिड पीपल का अटैचमेंट ज्यादा है, इंटीग्रेशन ज्यादा है। जिसी का इंटीग्रेशन ज्यादा है इसी का सुइसाइड रेट, उसका सुइसाइड रेट कम होना चाहिए। जिसी का इंटीग्रेशन कम है, डिसइंटीग्रेशन जो एक्सपीरियंस करते हैं, वो ग्रुप का सुइसाइड रेट ज्यादा होगा। इसीलिए मैरिड पर्सन्स आर हैविंग लेस पॉसिबिलिटी ऑफ कमिटिंग सुइसाइड एंड अनमैरिड पर्सन्स लाइक बैचलर एंड स्पिंस्टर are having higher possibility of committing suicide. Durkheim collected data from different parts of the Europe and by adopting comparative method reached at the conclusion that the rate of suicide among bachelor and spinster is higher than the rate of suicide among the married people. क्यों? रीजन क्या है? रीजन ये है कि bachelor and spinsters are experiencing disintegration with the group, married people are experiencing integration with the group. So lack of integration is the main cause of egoistic suicide. I have already explained. इसलिए ये तीन स्टेटमेंट जो कंपैरेटिव मेथड पर आधार होकर हुआ था, ये तीन स्टेटमेंट को मैं आपको एक्सप्लेन कर दिया। So in this way all of you are clear what egoistic suicide is all about. Just in very simple way, I try to explain you the fact that egoistic suicide is committed by a person who is experiencing disintegration or detachment with the group. Group may be the family, group may be the religious group, group may be the country, group may be the whole world. और egoistic suicide को डिस्कशन करने के लिए तीन कंपैरेटिव स्टेटमेंट दरखेम ने दिया। क्या है वो तीन स्टेटमेंट मैं आपको बता दिया। फर्स्ट स्टेटमेंट है रेट ऑफ सुइसाइड एमंग प्रोटेस्टेंट इज हायर देन कैथोलिक। सेकेंड स्टेटमेंट रेट ऑफ सुइसाइड एमंग नॉन एंग्लिकन प्रोटेस्टेंट इज हायर देन एंग्लिकन प्रोटेस्टेंट एंड रेट ऑफ सुइसाइड एमंग बैचलर एंड स्पिंस्टर इज हायर देन married people. All of you are clear. So in this way egoistic suicide is over, and egoistic suicide is committed by the people who are experiencing disintegration or detachment with the group. Okay, right now come to other type of suicide. Now is altruistic suicide. But before going to altruistic suicide, I want to show you the diagram again. This is the diagram. This is the graphical presentation of suicide. I told you this is the x-axis. This is the right hand side of the x-axis, that is plus side. This is the left hand side of x-axis, that is the minus side. Minus side means disintegration, plus side means integration. A disintegrated person is experiencing egoistic suicide. But what happened, you see, right now the person's integration or attachment, right now the person's attachment or integration with the group increased. As a person's attachment with the group increased, obviously the possibility of suicide started declining. So a disintegrated person is experiencing egoistic suicide. But a person's integration with the group increased, possibility of suicide got reduced. Person's integration with the group increased, suicide potential got reduced, but it increased. surpassed beyond the desirable limit. Are you getting my point? Surpassed beyond the desirable limit. There is a popular saying that too much of everything is bad. Too much of everything is bad. बंदा का इंटीग्रेशन नहीं था ग्रुप के साथ, इसीलिए वो सुइसाइड कर दिया, क्या कि वो डिसइंटीग्रेशन एक्सपीरियंस करता था। लेकिन ये बंदा का इंटीग्रेशन बढ़ गया ग्रुप के साथ, सुइसाइडल पोटेंशियल रिड्यूस हो गया, कम हो गया। लेकिन बंदा का इंटीग्रेशन विद द ग्रुप के साथ बढ़ गया, इतना बढ़ गया क्या कि वो पर्सन ओवर इंटीग्रेशन एक्सपीरियंस कर दिया ग्रुप के साथ। जो बंदा का इंटीग्रेशन ग्रुप के साथ ज्यादा हो जाएगा, ओवर इंटीग्रेशन वो एक्सपीरियंस करेंगे। दिस इज टू मच ऑफ इंटीग्रेशन। आज आई टोल्ड यू द फैक्ट दैट टू मच ऑफ इंटीग्रेशन इज बैड। सो while a person experiences over integration with the group, that person is also having a possibility of committing suicide. पर्सन का इंटीग्रेशन नहीं था ग्रुप के साथ, सुइसाइडल पोटेंशियल बढ़ गया। इंटीग्रेशन बढ़ गया, सुइसाइडल पोटेंशियल कम हो गया। लेकिन इंटीग्रेशन बढ़कर ओवर इंटीग्रेशन हो गया। जब इंटीग्रेशन बढ़कर ओवर इंटीग्रेशन हो गया, वो बंदा का सुइसाइडल पोटेंशियल भी हायर हो गया। इसलिए क्या कि एक लोग कहते हैं टू मच इंटीग्रेशन, टू मच ऑफ एवरीथिंग इज बैड। सो मैं ये बोलने के लिए चाहता हूं, an over integrated person is also having a possibility of committing suicide, but the suicide that would be committed by a person experiencing over integration or over attachment with the group is called altruistic suicide. Make a comparison. Egoistic suicide is committed by a person who is experiencing detachment or disintegration. Opposite of egoistic suicide is altruistic suicide. Altruistic suicide, opposite of egoistic suicide, is altruistic suicide. So what is altruistic suicide? You can write it down. Altruistic suicide is committed by a person who experiences over integration or over attachment with the group. That group may be family, that group may be the religious group, that group may be the country, that group may be the whole world. Got my point? So, in this way, the definition of altruistic suicide I am explaining you again in a very brief manner, in a very precise manner. Altruistic suicide is a suicide committed by the people who are experiencing over integration or over attachment with the group. Clear? Just now I am making derivation. Altruistic. Altruistic is the root. Altruist. Altruist. Who is altruist? Altruist is a person who is ready to sacrifice his or her life for the betterment of the group. Altruist is a person who is ready to sacrifice his life or her life for the betterment of his group. Group may be family, group may be the country, group may be the whole world, group may be your religion, anything. So, altruist person is a person who is ready to sacrifice his life for the betterment of his or her group. देखो कंपैरिजन करो. Egoist is not at all attached with the group. Egoist always thinks about himself or herself. Egoist, for egoist, self is real. On the other hand, for altruist, self is unreal and group is real. Make a comparison. For egoist, group is meaningless. Self is real for an egoist. Because egoist is self-centric. Egoist does not think anything beyond self. So self is real. Opposite of egoist is altruist. Altruist के लिए self का कुछ मीनिंग नहीं है। ऑल्ट्रुइस्ट के लिए ग्रुप ही सब कुछ है। ऑल्ट्रुइस्ट सोचता है क्या कि ग्रुप इज रियल, सेल्फ इज अनरियल। दैट्स द रीजन ही इज रेडी टू सैक्रिफाइस हिज लाइफ फॉर द बेटरमेंट ऑफ हिज ग्रुप। समझ गए सब? ओके, यू सी altruist. What is altruistic suicide? I explained. A person who is experiencing over-integration or over-attachment with the group is having higher possibility of committing suicide. That is called altruistic suicide. Or in other words, altruistic suicide is a type of suicide committed by the people having over-integration or over-attachment with the group. Okay? Right now, come to Durkheimian analysis. Durkheim has considered some classic example in context of altruistic suicide. Durkheim is of the opinion that sati system in India is an example of altruistic suicide. Japanese harakiri custom is also an example of altruistic suicide. Eskimo old man, the way Eskimo old people kill themselves, that is also an example of altruistic suicide. I will be explaining you in detail. What is sati system? You know, obviously, starting from, you might have studied in history, starting from post-Vedic period till the advent of Britishers in India, sati system was persisting in our country. In history, you might have studied all these things. So what is sati system? Sati system is a system by which, after the death of the husband, a Hindu woman was jumping into the funeral pyres of her dead husband. This is sati system. You know, Raja Rammohn Roy fought against sati system. He mounted pressure upon British authority. That's the reason Britishers were forced to stop sati system in India. Okay. So I told you the fact that sati system is a customary practice persisting in India from post-Vedic period till the advent of the Britishers in our country, and sati system encouraged a woman to jump into the funeral pyres of the dead husband after the death of the husband. This is sati system. Durkheim is of the opinion that sati system is an example of altruistic suicide. How? You know, in India, in tradition-ridden days, women were not having access to education, they were not studying, though things have been drastically and dramatically changed today. So, in high caste, the girls are getting married even before attaining biological maturity. Child marriage system was there. Pre-puberty marriage system was existing. In traditional Indian society, women were frequently told about the story of Sati, Sita, Savitri, Damayanti. Since childhood, girls were very frequently reminded of the fact that they don't have any independent identity. Before their marriage, during their childhood period, they are identified by their father. After marriage, they are identified by their husband. So, in this way, these values were injected into their mind that you are a girl, you don't have any independent identity, you are identified by your father before marriage, and you are identified by your husband after marriage. Without, and as child marriage was persisting in India, obviously only for a few years a girl lived in her family, but at the age of 7, 8, 9, 10 or 11, she came to the house of the husband. And since childhood, obviously, the stories related to Sita, Savitri, Damayanti was very frequently told to the girl In this way, a Gaul was thinking that this is my culture, this is my religion, which says expect me to be a sati, and after my husband's death, I should not be alive. That's the reason I have to practice sati system. What is that sati system? After death of the husband, I have to jump into the funeral pyres of my dead husband. These ideas were injected, incorporated, instilled, and ingrained into the mind of the Gauls. Is it attachment or over-attachment? This is over-attachment. क्योंकि शब्द इंडिविजुअल है, एवरी इंडिविजुअल हैज लाइफ. इतना अटैचमेंट क्यों दिखाएंगे? क्या कि विदाउट माई हस्बैंड आई डोंट हैव एनी आइडेंटिटी. ये तो अटैचमेंट नहीं है, ये ओवर अटैचमेंट है. ये तो इंटीग्रेशन नहीं है, वो ओवर इंटीग्रेशन है. द पैटर्न ऑफ सोशलाइजेशन फॉर द गर्ल्स इन ट्रेडिशनल इंडिया promoted over integration among them. So what happened? A girl at the age of 7 or 8 got married. After marriage, she came and lived with the husband. Suppose one day husband died. इसी के बाद वो लड़की सोचा, वो वाइफ सोचा, मेरा लाइफ मीनिंगलेस है, विदाउट हस्बैंड लाइफ का कुछ मीनिंग नहीं है. ये तो मेरा कल्चर, ये तो मेरा ट्रेडिशन, ये तो मेरा ग्लोरीफाइड ट्रेडिशन जो ऐसे बोलते हैं, ग्लोरीफाइड ट्रेडिशन को मुझे रेस्पेक्ट करना होगा. ये सोच सोच कर वो क्या करता था? वो हस्बैंड का डेथ के बाद हस्बैंड का जो फ्यूनरल पायर जलता था, इसी को वो जंप करता था. लेकिन इन मेनी केसेस, आई एम टेलिंग यू, इन मेनी केसेस आफ्टर द डेथ ऑफ द हस्बैंड, मेनी वोमेन वेर लिटरली थ्रोन इनटू द फ्यूनरल पायर्स, लिटरली थ्रोन इनटू द फ्यूनरल पायर्स ऑफ द डेड हस्बैंड. लेकिन कोई तो जेन्युइन सती सिस्टम है. जेन्युइन सती सिस्टम में क्या होता था? क्या कि कोई फोर्स नहीं करता था, लेकिन वो वोमैन इतना मोटिवेटेड हो जाता था, इतना इन्फ्लुएंस्ड हो जाता था, क्या कि हस्बैंड का बाद, डेथ के बाद उनका अस्तित्व वो फीलिंग नहीं करता था, और वो क्या करता था? हस्बैंड का डेथ के बाद फ्यूनरल पायर्स को जंप करता था. सो इन दिस वे, wherever genuine sati was taking place, where nobody was forcing her to jump into the funeral pyre, rather she was very genuinely motivated to jump into funeral pyres. That is no doubt a true case of sati. So ये जो true case of sati वो explain करता था क्या कि वो ओवर इंटीग्रेटेड है सोसाइटी के साथ, ओवर इंटीग्रेटेड है रिलीजन के साथ, ओवर इंटीग्रेटेड है कस्टमरी प्रैक्टिस के साथ. इसीलिए तो हस्बैंड का डेथ के बाद वो हस्बैंड का फ्यूनरल पायर्स को जंप करता था. समझ गई? सो इन दिस वे आई विल बी टेलिंग यू द फैक्ट दैट sati system, as per Professor Durkheim's analysis, is an example of altruistic suicide, because after the death of the husband, the woman started thinking that I am an Indian woman, I am a Hindu woman, I am a high caste Hindu woman, I don't have independent existence without my husband. ये तो मेरा कस्टम है, ये तो मेरा ट्रेडिशन है, ये तो मेरा ग्लोरीफाइड रिलीजन है जो मुझे ऐसे इन्फ्लुएंस किया था, क्या कि हस्बैंड का डेथ के बाद मुझे ही हस्बैंड का फ्यूनरल पायर्स को जंप करना है. So whenever a girl or a woman was genuinely inspired because of her process of socialization to jump into the funeral pyres of dead husband, obviously that was happening because of her not integration but of over integration. So therefore Durkheim is of the opinion that over integration is the main cause of altruistic suicide, and the sati system, genuine sati, not forced sati, genuine sati system is an example of altruistic suicide. सब समझ गए? All of you got my point? Okay. Then Durkheim has also cited another example from Japan. What is that example? That is Japanese harakiri custom. What is Japanese harakiri custom? Harakiri custom is practiced by soldiers of Japan. क्या ये हाराकिरी कस्टम जापानीज का है? हाराकिरी कस्टम मीन्स whenever the soldiers are recruited in Japanese army or armed forces, they are very frequently told, they are very frequently trained, they are very frequently reminded of the fact that a Japanese soldier can never ever be defeated. He may be died in battlefield, but he cannot be defeated. This type of training is given to them. This type of thoughts are injected into their mind that a Japanese soldier cannot be defeated in battlefield. He may be died, but he can never ever be defeated. So suppose in battlefield, Japanese soldiers are fighting with the enemy soldiers. Enemy soldier killed one after another Japanese soldier. Only one or two soldiers are left. Obviously, enemy is very powerful. Their number is higher. These two soldiers would definitely be captured by the enemy soldiers. Before being captured by the enemy soldiers, what the Japanese soldiers were doing, they were bringing their sword. वो टाइम पर तो sword में युद्ध चलता था, स्टेन गन नहीं था. वो क्या होते हैं, जब जापानीज सोल्जर सोचते थे बैटलफील्ड में वो जरूर डिफीट हो जाएंगे, डिफीट होने से पहले वो क्या करते थे, अपना सोर्ड में अपना को किल करता था. क्या कि दे वेर ब्रिंगिंग देयर सोल्ड एंड दे वेर किलिंग देमसेल्फ. क्या कि एक बिलीफ है, जापानीज सोल्जर कैन नेवर एवर बी defeated, they may be died. Are you getting my point? So before being captured by enemy, before experiencing defeat by the enemies, they were killing themselves in battlefield. This is Japanese harakiri custom. Why? Because these ideas were injected into their mind. They started thinking that right now we are only one, I am only one, or we are only two soldiers, but enemies are having large number. They would capture us. They would inflict physical torture on us. Because of our inability of tolerating physical torture, we may reveal, we may expose the secret information related to our enemy. So if we reveal the secret information about our enemy, obviously secret information about our army to the enemies, then our security or security of our country would be in danger. So it's better to die in battlefield than experiencing defeat in the hand of the enemies. इसलिए एनिमी के साथ जब फाइट करते थे जापानीज सोल्जर, जब वो सोचते थे कि अभी मैं डिफीट एक्सपीरियंस कर रहा हूं, इससे पहले वो क्या करते हैं, वो करते थे, वो सुइसाइड करते थे. इसी को बोलते हैं जापानीज हाराकिरी कस्टम. ओके, सो ये जो जापानीज हाराकिरी कस्टम, इसका बैकग्राउंड है क्या, ओवर इंटीग्रेशन. बिकॉज व्हेनेवर ए वार इज टेकिंग प्लेस बिटवीन टू ग्रुप ऑफ पीपल, there is a possibility of winning the war, there is also a possibility of losing the war. But Japanese soldiers are trained in such a manner that they will never accept their defeat. Before experiencing their defeat, they would kill themselves, keeping in mind that it's better to die in battlefield than being trapped by enemy soldiers and experiencing torture by the enemy soldiers and revealing the secret information related to army to the enemy soldiers. This is over integration. So because of over integration, obviously Japanese harakiri custom was persisting. Got my point? Next is Eskimo old man. Durkheim has cited the classical example of Eskimo old man committing suicide. आप तो जानते हैं एस्किमो क्या कहाँ रहते हैं. They live in polar region. Polar region is having acute shortage of food grain. So while an Eskimo man reaches at the age of 60, suppose, he would think that I have reached at such a age that I won't be able to do any work. My country is experiencing shortage of food grain. I am alive. I am consuming the food. I am not able to do anything for my country. If I die, then the young men of our country, they can be properly fed and they can do lots of things for the country. ये तो ओवर इंटीग्रेशन है, ये तो ओवर अटैचमेंट है. क्या कि यू आर प्रिपेयरिंग फॉर सिविल सर्विस, यू क्रैक्ड सिविल सर्विस, एट द एज ऑफ 60 यू टुक रिटायरमेंट. रिटायरमेंट के बाद आप सोचेंगे मैं तो लाइफ लॉन्ग इतना काम किया, इतना टेंशन में रहा, अभी तो मेरा एंजॉयमेंट का टाइम आ गया, मैं तो एंजॉयमेंट करेंगे. क्या कि आई वुड बी एंगेज्ड इन एंजॉयमेंट टिल आई डाई. लेकिन क्या करते हैं एस्किमो ओल्ड मैन? वो सोचते हैं हमारा एज 60 के बाद मीनिंगलेस, हमारा लाइफ मीनिंगलेस हो गया, हम जीवित रहने के लिए नहीं चाहता हूँ, क्योंकि हम जीवित रहेंगे तो ये जो युवा वर्ग वो कुछ खाना अच्छा से नहीं खा पाएंगे, वो खाना नहीं खा पाएंगे तो वो कंट्री के लिए कुछ नहीं कर पाएंगे. सो वी हैव रीच्ड एट द एज ऑफ 60, वी हैव बिकम useless for our country. We have to die so that the food problem of our country, food problem of our society can be resolved. This is altruistic thought. Keeping this altruistic thought in mind, while the Eskimo man reaches at the age of 60, he climbs up a very tall tomb. Sitting on the top of the tall tomb, he would jump down. In this way he was killing himself. This is Eskimo old man's committing suicide. This was happening because of over integration. अटैचमेंट का तो जरूरत है, इंटीग्रेशन का तो जरूरत है, लेकिन ओवर अटैचमेंट, ओवर इंटीग्रेशन के लिए वो सुसाइड करता था. इसलिए दरखेम 3 एग्जाम्पल दे दिए अल्ट्रुइस्टिक सुसाइड बारे में. एक है सती सिस्टम इन इंडिया, दूसरा है जापानीज हाराकिरी कस्टम, तीसरा है एस्किमो ओल्ड मैन कमिटिंग सुसाइड. All of you are clear? Altruistic suicide. In a very simple sentence, I would like to tell you the fact that altruistic suicide is committed by the people who experience over integration and over attachment with the group. All of you are clear? ये जो श्रीलंका में जो LTTE थे, वो सुसाइड करते थे. कैसे? दे वेर फाइटिंग अगेंस्ट श्रीलंकन आर्मी एंड श्रीलंकन पुलिस. द मोमेंट दे रियलाइजेस द फैक्ट दैट दे वुड बी ट्रैप्ड बाय द श्रीलंकन आर्मी, बिफोर दैट दे वेर बट लीकिंग potassium cyanide tablet that was tied to their but neck with a thread, and touching that potassium suicide, testing that by their tongue, they were committing suicide. वो जो टेररिस्ट LTT के थे, उनका भी एग्जाम्पल आप ले सकते हैं. ये भी अल्ट्रुइस्टिक सुसाइड का एक एग्जाम्पल है. Even you can also take the example of the terrorist who attacked the World Trade Center on 11th September 2001 in America. That is altruistic suicide. ये सब मॉडर्न एग्जाम्पल है. दरखेम तो ये एग्जाम्पल नहीं दिए, लेकिन आप मेंशन कर सकते हैं क्या कि टेररिस्ट इज अटैच्ड विथ हिज टेररिस्ट ग्रुप, नॉट अटैच्ड, ओवर इंटीग्रेशन. He thinks that my group is real, my life is unreal. Let me die, but let not me expose, let not me reveal the secrecy of my group. So it's better to die than being captured by the enemy. All of you are clear? And मैं ये बोलना चाहता हूं, एक प्रवाद था, एक पॉपुलर बिलीफ परसिस्ट करता था वो टाइम पर, क्या कि आर्मी में सोल्जर सुइसाइड करते हैं. क्यों? किसी लिए? क्या कि कंडीशन ऑफ लाइफ ऑफ द सोल्जर्स इन आर्मी इज नॉट गुड. देयर इज हार्श डिसिप्लिन इम्पोज्ड अपॉन देम. दे लैक लिबर्टी. So lack of liberty and lack of discipline, harshness of life, these are the factors responsible for committing suicide on part of the soldiers in army. ये एक पॉपुलर बिलीफ उस टाइम पर था क्या कि सोल्जर सुइसाइड करते थे आर्मी में, क्योंकि हार्शनेस ऑफ लाइफ, रिगरस डिसिप्लिन, लैक ऑफ लिबर्टी, these are the factors responsible for committing suicide on part of the soldiers. Durkheim उनको रिजेक्ट कर दिए. Durkheim outrightly rejected all these things. एंड रिजेक्ट करने के लिए वो एक कंपैरेटिव स्टेटमेंट दे दिए. मैं बता रहा हूं कैसे दे दिए. देखो, Durkheim divided the soldiers in European army into two categories: officers versus non-officers. Officers versus non-officers. ऑफिसर्स वर्सेस नॉन ऑफिसर्स एक डिवीजन कर दिए दरखेम. दरखेम बोलते हैं हार्ड हार्शनेस ऑफ लाइफ, हार्ड लैक ऑफ लिबर्टी, हार्ड रिगरस डिसिप्लिन being the condition for committing suicide, then more percentage of non-officers would have committed suicide compared to the percentage of officers. Be very careful in matter of understanding this statement. क्या कि ऑफिसर का संख्या तो कम है, इसलिए ऑफिसर का सुइसाइड का संख्या भी कम होगा. नॉन ऑफिसर्स का संख्या ज्यादा है, इसीलिए नॉन ऑफिसर्स का सुइसाइड का नंबर भी ज्यादा होगा. लेकिन दरखेम बोलते हैं हार्ड लैक ऑफ लिबर्टी, हार्ड रिगरस डिसिप्लिन being the factor for committing suicide, then the percentage of suicide among non-officers would have been higher compared to the officers. क्या कि ऑफिसर्स का लाइफ कंफर्टेबल है, ऑफिसर्स का लाइफ में इतना रिगरस डिसिप्लिन नहीं है, इतना बट डिसिप्लिन नहीं है जितना नॉन ऑफिसर्स का लाइफ में होते हैं. सो दरखेम फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल डिवाइडेड द सोल्जर्स इनटू टू ग्रुप, ऑफिसर्स वर्सेस नॉन ऑफिसर्स. Durkheim says officers are having comparatively comfortable life, non-officers are not having that much comfort and convenience. Durkheim collected data from different parts of Europe and reached at the conclusion that the rate of suicide, rate or percentage of suicide among officers is higher than the non-officers. परसेंटेज में बोल रहा हूं, नंबर नहीं बोल रहा हूं. क्या कि ऑफिसर का नंबर कम है, सुइसाइड ऑफिसर का नंबर कम होगा, लेकिन परसेंटेज में कैलकुलेशन करेंगे तो द परसेंटेज ऑफ ऑफिसर्स कमिटिंग सुइसाइड इज मोर, द परसेंटेज ऑफ सुइसाइड among the non-officer is less. Durkheim is of the opinion that officers are having comparatively comfortable life, non-officers are having comparatively non-comfortable life or uncomfortable life. ऑफिसर्स का लिबर्टी है, नॉन ऑफिसर्स का लिबर्टी बहुत कम है. सो कंपैरिजन कर दरखेम बोलते हैं दैट if you say lack of liberty, rigorous discipline being the condition for committing suicide, then more percentage of non-officers would have committed suicide than officers. लेकिन डाटा कलेक्ट कर दरखेम प्रूव कर दिया परसेंटेज ऑफ सुइसाइड ऑफिसर्स का ज्यादा है, नॉन ऑफिसर्स का कम है. इसी का मतलब लैक ऑफ लिबर्टी, rigorous discipline are not the factors contributing towards suicide. How? For example, I am telling you. You see, officers, they are the leaders of the troop, they are the leaders of their group. While war takes place, officer is the commander, commanding the group. Officers feels motivated to make himself stand in front of the group. Enemies are targeting their, pointing their gun towards the forehead of the officer, commander, because enemy thinks if commander is killed, then the sense of moral, sense of motivation of the troop would be reduced. इसीलिए एनिमी क्या करते हैं, एनिमी उनका गन ऑफिसर्स का फोरहेड को पॉइंट कर ऑफिसर को मार देते हैं. एंड एज ऑफिसर्स दे थिंक, because in battlefield, you know, during the battle time, some battle drum is beaten. That battle drum injects a feeling of altruism. Battle drum injects a feeling of altruism. The officer thinks that I am the commander, I am the leader. I have to set example in battlefield. I have to lead the troop. Not a single person from my troop would be killed before my death. This type of over-integration comes into the mind of the officer while he is leading a troop in the battlefield, that I have to set an example. That's the reason he is making himself stand in front of the troop, and the enemy is pointing his gun towards the officer. In this way, officer is killed. So, collected data from different parts of Europe reached at the conclusion that the rate of suicide among officers is higher. The rate of suicide among non-officers is lower. Second thing I want to tell you on the basis of comparative method. You know, Durkheim divided the soldier into two categories. First is voluntarily recruited soldier, re-enlisted soldier. This is one category. Voluntarily recruited and re-enlisted. Voluntarily enlisted, voluntarily enlisted soldiers, or recruited, or voluntarily enlisted soldier or re-enlisted soldier. Re-enlisted soldier ये क्या है मैं बता रहा हूं. Somebody could not get a job. That's the reason he started thinking, no, getting a job in army is comparatively easy, because level of questions that is asked in recruitment process in army, level of difficulty is not so high. But the type of question that is asked in IS exam, in others recruitment for a higher post, that is very difficult. एक बंदा का क्या हुआ, कंट्री के साथ अटैचमेंट नहीं है, लेकिन वो सोचता हूं मैं आर्मी में इजी में जब मुझे मिल जाएगा, जब मिल जाएगा तो लाइफ लॉन्ग फाइनेंशियल सिक्योरिटी मुझे मिल जाएगा, ऐसे सोचकर वो आर्मी में ज्वाइन कर दिया. लेकिन उनका मन कहता है आर्मी में मत ज्वाइन करो, क्योंकि अच्छा जॉब के लिए कोशिश करो, लेकिन मेरा स्टैंडर्ड नहीं है, अदर जॉब के लिए मैं एलिजिबल नहीं है, क्योंकि मेरा इतना स्टैंडर्ड नहीं है, इसलिए मुझे आर्मी में जाना चाहिए. ये टाइप का जो रिक्रूटमेंट हुआ जिसी का, इसी को आप बोलेंगे सोल्जर who is drafted against his will in army. He does not like to be recruited in army, but he thinks to get a job in army is comparatively easy than getting job in a bank, getting job in Indian civil service. इसी को आप बोल सकते हैं ए सोल्जर रिक्रूटेड इन आर्मी अगेंस्ट हिज विल. ये एक कैटेगरी का सोल्जर है. दूसरा टाइप का सोल्जर है क्या, देयर इज ए वेरी वेरी टैलेंटेड पर्सन. he could have cleared UPSC civil service examination, he could have become IAS officer, IPS officer. लेकिन उनका ज्यादा से ज्यादा अटैचमेंट कंट्री के साथ है. वो सोचते हैं नो, आई हैव टू प्रोटेक्ट माई कंट्री, आई हैव टू बिकम ए कमांडर इन आर्मी, आई हैव टू ज्वाइन इन आर्मी, आई हैव टू बिकम ए लीडर इन आर्मी. ही टुक UPSC सिविल सर्विस एग्जामिनेशन फॉर NDA, फॉर CDS, and he became a leader, he became an officer in army. वो voluntarily recruited आप बोल सकते हैं. सो इसीलिए दरखेम क्या किए, सोल्जर को दो कैटेगरी में डिवाइड कर दिए. सोल्जर्स रिक्रूटेड इन आर्मी अगेंस्ट देयर विल, सेकेंड कैटेगरी सोल्जर वॉलंटरली रिक्रूटेड इन आर्मी. जो आर्मी में सर्विस करते हैं पहले 15-20 साल तक सर्विस करते हैं, इसी के बाद वो चाहेंगे तो सर्विस को और 10 ईयर एक्सटेंड कर सकते हैं। जो फर्स्ट 15 ईयर कंप्लीट करने के बाद और 10 to 15 ईयर्स जो सर्विस को एक्सटेंड करते हैं, वो टाइप का सोल्जर को आप बोल सकते हैं री एनलिस्टेड सोल्जर्स। सो इन दिस वे सोल्जर्स रिक्रूटेड इन आर्मी अगेंस्ट देयर विल एक कैटेगरी है, दूसरा कैटेगरी है री एनलिस्टेड सोल्जर्स इन आर्मी एंड वॉलंटरली एनलिस्टेड सोल्जर्स इन आर्मी। समझ गई? सो Durkheim in this way divided the soldiers into two categories. First is soldiers recruited in army against their will. Second, soldiers re-enlisted in army and soldiers voluntarily enlisted in army. And Durkheim collected data from different parts of Europe, reached at the conclusion that rate of suicide among voluntarily recruited soldiers and re-enlisted soldier is higher, and rate of suicide among soldiers recruited in army against their will is lower. How and why? क्या कि जब युद्ध लगेगा, जो वॉलंटरली रिक्रूटेड हो गया आर्मी में, वो क्या करेगा? वो Okay, so please come back to the discussion. I want to tell you the fact that Durkheim divided soldiers into two categories. First is soldiers recruited in army against their will. Second category of soldiers, those who are re-enlisted or those who are voluntarily recruited in army. And collecting data from different parts of Europe, Durkheim reached at the conclusion that the rate of suicide among the soldiers re-enlisted and voluntarily recruited in army is higher than the soldiers recruited in army against their will. What is the reason given by Durkheim? Durkheim is of the opinion that re-enlisted soldier and voluntarily enlisted soldier, they are having over-attachment with the country. While war takes place, they come forward to set an example. In battlefield, battle drum is beaten. That injects the spirit of altruism. And वो जब युद्ध चलते हैं, जो वॉलंटरली रिक्रूटेड सोल्जर है, वो सोचते हैं, ये बैटल ड्रम को सुनकर वो सोचते हैं, मुझे जीना है तो भारत के लिए, मुझे मरना है तो भारत के लिए, मुझे जीना है तो देश के लिए, मुझे मरना है तो देश के लिए। ऐसे सोचकर वो क्या करते हैं? वो बैटलफील्ड में एग्जाम्पल सेट करने के लिए चाहते हैं। That's the reason they came forward. They make themselves stand at the forefront position. They lead their troop and the enemy points their gun towards their forehead and in this way they are killed. लेकिन जो सोल्जर विल के अगेंस्ट आर्मी में रिक्रूटमेंट हो गए, जब बैटल चलते हैं, जब वार चलते हैं, युद्ध चलते हैं, वो तो क्या करते हैं? लीव के लिए अप्लाई करते हैं, लेकिन लीव तो वो टाइम पर ग्रांट नहीं होते। जब लीव ग्रांट नहीं होते हैं, उनका तो इतना अटैचमेंट कंट्री के साथ नहीं होते हैं, वो क्या करते हैं? वो बैक लाइन में खड़ा होते हैं। जो फ्रंट लाइन में खड़ा होगा, उनका मरना का पॉसिबिलिटी ज्यादा है। समझ गए मेरा बात? यू मे आस्क मी द क्वेश्चन, सर एनिमी इज किलिंग दिस सोल्जर, हाउ इज इट सुइसाइड? बिकॉज द सोल्जर इज नॉट किलिंग हिमसेल्फ, rather enemy soldiers are killing. This is not suicide, this is murder. No, you may think like this, but Durkheim is of the opinion that suicide is not only the act of killing oneself only. Even if you have been inspired by an ideology, if somebody has been inspired by an ideology for which a full stop is put in his life, that is also suicide. Though the soldier is not killing himself, he is having over attachment and over integration because he is re-enlisted soldier. He is voluntarily recruited soldier. As he is making himself stand on the forefront, that's the reason the enemy soldiers are pointing their gun towards the forehead of this soldier, and in this way death is brought to the soldier. So in this way, Durkheim says suicide is not only the act of killing oneself. In addition to that, even if a person has been inspired by an ideology, by a thought for which full stop is brought in his life, full stop is put in his life, that is also an act of suicide. All of you are clear? So in this way, Durkheim explained altruistic suicide, and here also he adopted comparative method, like rate of suicide among officers, percentage of suicide among officers is more, percentage of suicide among the non-officer is less, percentage of suicide among voluntarily recruited soldier, re-enlisted soldier is higher, percentage of suicide among the soldiers recruited in army against their will is lower. In this way, Durkheim, by adopting comparative method, also explained you altruistic suicide. Right now come to other two types of suicide. इससे पहले आप एक बार आ जाइए द ओरिजिनल diagrammatic representation को. Please come back to the graphical presentation. You see, on the basis of social integration, Durkheim made a twofold classification. Durkheim made a twofold classification of suicide, that is egoistic suicide and altruistic suicide, that is discussed and completed by me. Come to social regulation. On the basis of social regulation also, Durkheim made a twofold classification of suicide. Social regulation has been taken on y-axis, plus this is upward side of y-axis, that is plus, this is the downward side of x-axis, that is minus. Minus means deregulation, plus means regulation. So on the basis of social regulation, Durkheim divided suicide into two categories. First is anomic suicide and the second is fatalistic suicide. What is anomic suicide? I would be discussing. You see, anomic suicide is on the downward side of y-axis. Downward means this is regulation. Downward means minus side of regulation. Minus of regulation means deregulation. Deregulation. What is deregulation? You see, anomic suicide. Anomy has been derived from the root word. Anomic has been derived from the root word, that is anomy. Anomy means normlessness. 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 Regulation. Regulationlessness. Lessness or deregulation also. Deregulation also. So anomic has been derived from the root word, that is anomy. Anomy means normlessness, regulationlessness or deregulation. So what is anomic suicide? I will be explaining you. Durkheim is of the opinion that anomic suicide is a type of suicide committed by a person who is experiencing deregulation or normlessness or indiscipline in his life. Getting my point? I am repeating it again. Anomic suicide is a suicide committed by a person who is experiencing deregulation, indiscipline, lawlessness, regulationlessness in his life. Durkheim is of the opinion that anomic suicide is committed in economic sphere. He says, people, those who are engaged in stock market activities, those who are owner of big industrial houses, even divorcees whose marital life has been failed. So Durkheim is of the opinion that anomic suicide is committed by the people who are experiencing deregulation in their life. Particularly with respect to business activities, Durkheim has discussed about anomic suicide. He is of the opinion that people, those who are engaged in business activities, in industries, means those who are owner of a big industrial house, those who are participating in stock market, they are having higher possibility of committing a type of suicide that is called anomic suicide. What is that, you see? Particularly, everyone man wants to become very rich, want to become industrialist, but becoming successful in matter of running industry is not so easy. There is higher risk. Where there comes higher risk, there also comes the possibility of a high level of indiscipline in your life. For example, I am telling you, suppose there is a rich person, started from a humble beginning, right now he became a Crorepati, he became a millionaire, billionaire, trillionaire. Getting my point? But all of a sudden he lost his prosperity. Something went wrong in his business. Right now, from Crorepati, he became a roadpati, came to directly road and sat on the road. Sudden downfall came in his economic condition. Whenever downfall comes, slowly, steadily and continuously, man is having capacity to adjust with it. But whenever downfall comes, suddenly, overnight, it's very difficult. In fact, it's impossible to make adjustment with this situation. So in this way, if a person of a million, billion and trillion is experiencing sudden economic adversity, his life would become deregulated. His life would become indisciplined, yes or no? You know, you come to the classroom every day. Suppose class, I have been taking class for the last 1 month. You are coming to class every day. A regulation is maintained in your life because you are expected to reach in my class at 5 o'clock and at 7:30 it would be over. So after attending the class regularly, sometimes you think, when sir would give us a leave for 2-3 days so that I would be very happy. But I gave you leave for 1 month, suppose. Obviously your life would experience deregulation. 2 दिन 3 दिन आप बहुत एंजॉय करेंगे, इसके बाद आप एंजॉय नहीं कर सकते हैं. आप सोचेंगे नहीं, मैं तो क्लास जब था 5 बजे में VVRIS में पहुंचता था, अभी तक क्लास बंद हो गया 1 महीने के लिए. 2-3 दिन एंजॉय करेंगे, इसके बाद सोचेंगे नहीं, क्यों 5 बजे क्यों इतना अलर्ट हो गए, सो जाएंगे 1 घंटा 2 घंटा. ये जो एक शेड्यूल है, शेड्यूल को मेंटेन करना ही रेगुलेशन है. शेड्यूल को मेंटेन नहीं कर, शेड्यूल को ब्रेक करना ही डीरेगुलेशन है. सो देयर इज ए पर्सन ऑफ बिलियन रुपीज, ऑल ऑफ ए सडन ही लॉस्ट हिज प्रॉस्पेरिटी and his life would become deregulated. That deregulated person is having possibility of committing suicide, that is called anomic suicide. So anomic suicide is committed by the people who are experiencing normlessness, regulationlessness, deregulation or indiscipline in their life. So indiscipline or deregulation is the main cause of anomic suicide. Durkheim has discussed about anomic suicide with respect to industry, and at the same time Durkheim is of the opinion that there is also a possibility of anomic suicide in domestic life. What is domestic life? Husband and wife, they are living together. Because of their attachment, their life is also getting regulated. After marriage, you cannot do the things the way you want. You have to make compromise with your partner. So presence of partner brings regulation to your life. लेकिन जब मैरिटल फेलुअर हो जाते हैं, मैरिज ब्रेक हो जाते हैं, इसको हम बोलते हैं डिवोर्स. सपोज देयर इज ए कपल, husband and wife, they are leading a good life. Obviously husband was looking after the wife, wife was also taking care of the husband. In this way regulation was brought in their life. But something went wrong. Right now they could not stay together. Every day they started fighting. Every day, every moment they started fighting. They would think, what is the need of living under the same roof and fighting n number of times every day? It's better to be segregated. It is better to be separated. Right now they got separated from each other through divorce. जब डिवोर्स हो जाते हैं, डिवोर्स के बाद सपोज राइट नाउ ऑफिस ऑफ द हस्बैंड इज क्लोज्ड एट 5 o'clock. जब डिवोर्स नहीं हुआ था वो सोचता था 5 बजे तो ऑफिस क्लोज हो गया, 6 से पहले घर में पहुंचना है. लेकिन जब डिवोर्स हो गया वो सोचता है क्या कि नोबडी इज वेटिंग फॉर माई रिटर्न पाथ. व्हाइल नोबडी इज वेटिंग फॉर माई रिटर्न पाथ, then the road itself is my best friend. Why to go back to home where nobody is waiting for me? इसलिए ऑफिस क्लोज होने के बाद वो घर वापस नहीं जाएंगे. कब चल जाएंगे क्लब, कब चल जाएंगे पब, कब अल्कोहल ड्रिंक्स करते हैं. ऐसे ऐसे कर क्या होते हैं, उनका लाइफ में डीरेगुलेशन आते हैं. जब डीरेगुलेशन लाइफ में आते हैं वो क्या करते हैं, उनका पॉसिबिलिटी ज्यादा है सुसाइड करने के लिए. इसलिए दरखेम इज ऑफ द ओपिनियन दैट पीपल हु आर एक्सपीरियंसिंग डिवोर्स, पीपल हुज पार्टनर्स आर डाइंग, देयर लाइफ इज बिकमिंग डीरेगुलेटेड, and those people are having higher possibility of committing suicide. That is called anomic suicide. So in nutshell, I want to tell you the fact that anomic suicide is committed by the people who are experiencing lawlessness in their life, regulationlessness in their life, indiscipline in their life. And Durkheim is of the opinion that people, those who are engaged in stock market activity, those who are engaged in business activities, those who are running industry, there is higher possibility that sudden adversity would come to their life. Because of it, their life would become deregulated. So after losing prosperity, the billionaires, they are having a possibility of committing suicide. That is called anomic suicide. Okay. And in addition to that, Durkheim is of the opinion that after failure of marriage, after divorce, deregulation creeps in the life of the people, for which they also commit suicide. So divorcees, wealthy people, they commit anomic suicide. All of you are clear? Right now, come to last category of suicide. Last category of suicide, that is fatalistic suicide. You see, in most of the books, 3 categories of suicide have been mentioned. That is, egoistic suicide is committed by a person who is experiencing disintegration. Second, altruistic suicide is committed by a person who is experiencing over-integration. Anomic suicide is committed by a person whose life is experiencing deregulation or indiscipline. But the original book written by Professor Emile Durkheim with the title Lee Suicide, which was published in the year 1897, there Durkheim discussed about 4th category of suicide in the footnote of the book, that is fatalistic suicide. What is fatalistic suicide? आप देखो, डीरेगुलेशन आ गया लाइफ में, सुसाइड का पॉसिबिलिटी बढ़ गया, लेकिन डीरेगुलेशन कम हो गया, रेगुलेशन आ गया लाइफ में, अच्छा हो गया लाइफ, सुसाइड का पॉसिबिलिटी कम हो गया. लेकिन रेगुलेशन बढ़कर ओवर रेगुलेशन हो गया, बढ़ गया. सो रेगुलेशन इन लाइफ स्टार्टेड इंक्रीजिंग, पॉसिबिलिटी ऑफ सुसाइड गॉट रिड्यूस्ड. रेगुलेशन इंक्रीज्ड, surpassed beyond the desirable limit. Person experienced over regulation. I have already told you the fact that too much of everything is bad. रेगुलेशन का जरूरत है लाइफ में, रेगुलेशन लाइफ में कम हो जाएगा तो सुसाइड का पॉसिबिलिटी ज्यादा हो जाएगा. लेकिन रेगुलेशन बढ़ गया, बढ़कर ओवर रेगुलेशन में कन्वर्ट हो गया. जब रेगुलेशन बढ़कर ओवर रेगुलेशन में कन्वर्ट हो गया, पॉसिबिलिटी ऑफ सुसाइड भी ज्यादा हो जाएगा. So I am telling you the fact. In the original book with the title 𝐬𝐴, published in the year 1897, in the footnote of the book, Professor Emile Durkheim has discussed about the fourth type of suicide, that is fatalistic suicide. Professor Durkheim is of the opinion that fatalistic suicide is committed by those people whose life is experiencing over-regulation. You can write it down. Fatalistic suicide is committed by the people who are experiencing over-regulation in their life. Durkheim has cited some example, one example with respect to fatalistic suicide. Durkheim is of the opinion that during the period of slavery, I would explain you what slavery is all about. During the period of slavery, slaves committed a suicide, a type of suicide that is called fatalistic suicide. You know, slavery was a period in European history. Under the period of slavery, people in European society were divided into two groups. First is slave masters. Second is slaves. So during the period of slavery, people of Europe were divided into two groups, namely slave and slave master. Slaves were not having any liberty. Slaves were treated just like a piece of property. They were not treated as human beings. Slaves' life was completely over-regulated by the terms and conditions of the slave master. Today you say, I am having 10 lakhs bank account, balance in my account. I am having 40 lakhs balance in my account, 40 crores balance in my account. In slavery period, the slave masters were claiming that I am having 30 slaves, I am having 300 slaves. So slaves were not treated as human beings. They were treated as property by the slave master. So slave master was the owner of the slave. What the slave would do, whether the slave will marry or not, all the decision related to the life of the slave was taken not by the slave himself but by his master. So this is over-regulation. Slave's life was completely over-regulated by master. This is the slavery system. So in this way, slaves could not think anything beyond their master. They started thinking whether they have to marry or not, decision would be taken by the master. Whether they would go for rearing the cattle or not, that would be also decided by their master. In this way, each and every aspect of their life was regulated, in fact over-regulated by master. That's the reason during the slavery period, slaves also committed suicide because of over-regulation that they were experiencing in their life. This is the example of fatalistic suicide given by Durkheim. Okay? In this way, in today's class, I discussed the meaning of suicide. In addition to that, I discussed how the biologist, psychologist, geographer, climatologist explained suicide by considering the immediate cause, the instant cause of suicide. But how Durkheim considered the root cause of suicide, how social condition like social integration and social regulation is the root cause of suicide, that has been discussed by Durkheim. In addition to that, I also discussed, Durkheim explained suicide in terms of two social factors. One is social integration. On the basis of social integration, he divided suicide into two categories. First is egoistic suicide, is committed because of disintegration. Its opposite is altruistic suicide, is committed by the people who are experiencing over-integration. Then on the basis of social regulation, Durkheim divided suicide into two categories. First is anomic suicide, is committed by the people who are experiencing indiscipline in their life, normlessness, regulationlessness in their life. On the other hand, Second category of suicide on the basis of regulation axis is fatalistic suicide committed by the people who are experiencing over-regulation. So this is all about 4 types of suicide discussed by Durkheim. And I told you this topic would be asked in Sociology paper 1. In addition to that, this topic has already been asked in GS paper 1, why the rate of suicide among young girls, young women in India is growing. That also I have discussed in the next class. Okay, in addition to that, every year in UPSC Viva Bhos, a question is asked, why the rate of suicide among farmers in India has been increased over the last 20 years or 30 years in the period of globalization. Okay, in this way, I discussed about sociological analysis of suicide, but time would not permit me to discuss about the criticism of Durkheim's theory of suicide. In the next class, I would discuss about the criticism part of Durkheim's analysis of suicide. Okay. And before winding off my class for today, I want to make an important announcement on behalf of 𝑭𝒐𝒖𝒏𝒅𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏 the prominent IAS coaching institution of India, providing coaching for civil service examination, that 𝑭𝒐𝒖𝒏𝒅 is conducting a free test series program for the sociology students, those who are writing the mains exam this time. Means in 2024, those who are writing the mains exam, for them, 𝑭𝒐𝒖𝒏𝒅 is announcing a free test series program. We would be conducting 6 full-length tests, 6 comprehensive tests, 6 tests. This is completely free of cost. You need not require to pay anything. But you have to give your admit card along with the photograph, okay, to be eligible to sit in this free test. 6 tests would be conducted. 28th, that means from tomorrow, the first test would be conducted. And within 1 month, all 6 full-length comprehensive tests would be conducted. I myself would evaluate your test paper, test answers. I would also discuss the answer. I would also provide you the model answer. Those who are interested to join in this program organized by 𝑭𝒐𝒖𝒏𝒅, please get enrolled, and you can contact also 𝑭𝒐𝒖𝒏𝒅. The contact number is written here. This is the contact number provided by the organization. You get enrolled. 6 tests should be conducted within 1 month. Discussion of all the 6 tests would be made by me. Your papers would be, answer sheet would be evaluated by me. Model answer would also be provided by me. And the standard of question is on par with the UPSC standard. You would feel no difference in our classroom test and the final test that would be conducted by UPSC. Those who are interested can join by contacting this number. Okay, and the topics that I discussed today, obviously different types of suicide, a detailed discussion has been made here. You can also check it, different types of suicide in detail. The comprehensive class note has been provided by me. Okay, so if you have any queries related to sociology, you can contact our office. And I extend my thankfulness to you all for watching this class. Wish you all the best. Thank you.